Good evening, everyone. My name is Dean Argyris. I'm the village president, along with my fellow board members, Trustee Kruger, Trustee Lang, Trustee Hare. We welcome you all here tonight, and we welcome Cook County Board of Review Commissioner Dan Patlak. A lot of concerns within our community, and I think this is a great opportunity to give us a good lesson on how our tax bills do work. And Dan, I welcome you to the podium.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor or Village President Argyris, and the rest of the members of the Village Board. Also, I want to say thank you to our Township Assessor, Jerry Sadler, who also is a sponsor of this event. Jerry's right over there. So, my goal for you tonight is that when you walk out of here, you're going to know at least a little bit more about property taxes in general, and you'll know a lot more about how to file the best possible appeal to give you the best possible chance for a reduction in your property assessment. So I'm going to do this in 3 parts. The first part, I'm going to answer the most common question I've received since about 2007, and that's when I used to be the township assessor here in Wheeling Township, and the question continues. Then we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about exemptions, and then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of how to file an appeal at the Board of Review. So that question is one, as I said, that still continues, and you can tell me whether or not it's been in your mind or germane to what you're thinking, and that is, hey Dan, how is it that while my property value has gone down, my property taxes have continued to rise year after year? Is that something that's been on anybody's mind? I see a couple of nods. That's good, so I know I'm not wasting your time. There's a variety of reasons to that, or a variety of answers to that question. And so to give you the first answer, first we have to understand where your property taxes go. So can someone here, without looking at your tax bill, tell me one place, one entity that receives your property taxes? And I'll give you a hint. It's not the federal government and it's not the state government. So where do they go? Okay, school districts. Yeah, wherever I go, I always hear that as the first answer, the schools. And you know, before I came here tonight, I actually checked my tax bill just to see if it's consistent with the prior years, and it was. I looked at what I paid, and by the way, I live in Wheeling. I live over by Schoenbeck and Dundee, and I added up the elementary school, the high school, and the community college, and then I compared that total to my total tax bill, and it was 69% of my bill. So, yes, schools take the vast majority of our property tax dollars. But can someone tell me another place that gets our property taxes? What? The Park District. Yeah, we got beautiful Park District over there, and they take their share. What else? Library. The library, yes. What else? The County of Cook, that's what pays my salary? What else? So we got the county, the Park District, the library, the schools, what else? Township. The village. The township and the village, where we are right now, that's right. What else? Anything? How about the Forest Preserve District? How about the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District? They spend $1.5 billion every year. How about if you live in Prospect Heights, I think that they have a fire protection district. There are some areas in Illinois, I don't think in Cook County, that actually have street lighting districts. So in other words, a government that's totally dedicated to lighting the streets. And they have a line item on the property tax bill. We don't have that in Cook County, but they do have some of those elsewhere. Depending on where you live, you're going to see anywhere from probably a dozen to 16 different governmental entities that get some of your property tax money. So every year, each one of those governmental units, they have a special meeting. It's called their levy meeting. And it's published in the newspaper for the public to know about. Levy is just another word for demand for money. So every year, the boards of these various governmental units will get together and they'll look into the future and they'll say, how much are we going to need for our operations in the future? And then whatever they need, they're going to ask for. Now, they're constrained by a law that was passed in the early 1990s, commonly known as property tax caps. Now, the law didn't necessarily cap property taxes, but it did slow down the rate of growth of property taxes. There's a couple of caveats to that law, which I'll get to in a little bit. But what the law says is that you can only raise the levy from one year to the next, either by 5% or the rate of inflation, whichever is less. So imagine you have the local high school. Now, you should know that most taxing districts will raise their levy to the maximum that they can from one year to the next. That's most cases. There are exceptions to that, but the exceptions are rare. I can tell you of two exceptions I know about. A couple of years ago, the village of Wheeling did a zero levy increase. And I think a year or so before that, the village of Mount Prospect did a zero levy increase. But typically speaking, the levies are increased to the maximum allowed to by law. In any case, let's assume you have the local high school, and the local high school in the first year is asking for $100. The following year, they have their levy meeting, they raise the levy to the maximum, and since the early 90s, I don't recall a time when our inflation rate was 5%. There may have been a year, maybe I missed it, but I would say on average, our inflation rate's been around 3%. The last few years it's been less, but some years it's been more, and I would say on average, about 3. So let's say for our example that the high school decides to raise it to the average increase. The increase was the average that year, 3%. So from one year to the next, they're asking for $100 and then $103. The next year, they'll raise it the maximum that they can as well, and it'll be not $106, but it'll be $106.20 maybe. The year after that, it'll be maybe $109.90, and then $113.95, and so on and so forth. Now, you'll notice that I wasn't going 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3, and that's because of something we learned when we were in grade school, the power of compound interest. Great thing when you're putting your money in the savings account, not such a good thing with taxes, because as you can tell from the example, taxes will build on each other. Now, take the example of the high school that I gave you and multiply it by most taxing districts in most years, in most areas, and you have an additional demand for money of at least 3% or around 3% a year. Now, who's paying for that? Well, you've got all the property owners in the area. That would include what most of the people in this room are, residential property owners, but it also includes people who own commercial or industrial property, vacant land. So all property owners are responsible for the entire tax bill each year. And so what you have is a steadily rising demand for taxes, and that's a demand that has to be met. And then you've got the property owners. In most cases, the same property owners from one year to the next. So even when the values of the properties go down, if you've got a rising demand, you've got the same group of people that are responsible. So even when the value goes down, you end up paying more. Now, we've all experienced a decline in our property value since about 2007 when the recession hit. Maybe 30, 40%. I think it's leveled off, and in some cases it's come back to some degree. But with all of us having our values go down, then none of us have gotten a break from that reduced value, even when the assessor has caught up with his assessments reflecting the reduced value. Now, if you had a situation where this gentleman here, if his value went down 30%, but all of his neighbors' values only went down 10% or they stayed the same, well then certainly he could probably expect to pay a lower tax bill, even with rising demand for money, because everybody else's value relative to his went down less. But when everybody's value is going down approximately the same rate, you can expect that everybody's going to pay more, maybe not exactly the same amount more, but more in any case because more is being demanded. I mentioned earlier that tax limitation law has a couple of caveats. One caveat is for home rule municipalities. A home rule municipality is a municipality with 25,000 or more residents. They're not covered by that. So in a village like Wheeling, they're not limited to an increase of the rate of inflation or 5%, whichever is lower. They can raise the levy as much as they think that they need to raise it. And that's, as I say, that's the same in most municipalities with 25,000 or more. So there may have been times when you've read in the paper something about a levy, whether it's in Arlington Heights or Mount Prospect or Wheeling, going above that 3% or 5% in a particular year, and that's the reason why. The other caveat is this. Let's go back to our high school. Let's say the high school sees that in the future, enrollment is rising. They anticipate having to hire more teachers and buy more textbooks and getting more supplies of all kinds. And they believe that the allowed levy increase is not going to be sufficient to fund what they need to do. They can go to referendum and they can ask the taxpayers in their district for more money, something over and above what they're allowed to raise the levy by law. Now let's assume that they want to ask for an extra 8% levy. Now keep in mind that word I gave, extra 8%. Because what you'll see likely reported in the newspaper is that they'll report it like this. They'll say, hey, if the average home valued at $250,000, if this referendum passes, they'll pay an extra $92 a year. What they're not telling you is that's the extra that you'll be paying. They don't tell about the amount that they're allowed by law to raise the levy. If it's 3% in a particular year, that means what they're really asking for is an increase of 3% plus 8%, which is 11%. So while the newspaper is reporting $92, maybe the real increase is $115 or $120 or some greater amount. So as taxpayers, you should just keep that in mind if ever there is a referendum on the ballot, just so you're aware of what it's really going to cost you and you can make a value judgment whether or not you think it's worth it. What typically happens with referendums is that the board of the high school or whatever governmental body decides to put the referendum out there, they'll put it up for a vote in what we call an off-year election. In other words, an election when it's not for president, not for governor. Usually it'll be a municipal type election when fewer people come out to vote. And oftentimes the people who do come out to vote will have an extra interest in whatever entity happens to be asking for the increase in their levy. So in the case of the schools, who's really interested? Well, you know, the employees of the school would have an added interest because their livelihood may be at stake, and also parents. Now the parents may believe that they are overassessed and overtaxed, paying more than they want to pay, but they've got kids in the school. And what are they hearing from the school board? Well, they're hearing from the school board that if the referendum doesn't pass, we'll probably have to cut out 3 out of the 4 foreign languages that we teach. And they're hearing that the average class size may have to go from 21 to 27 kids, and that we may have to cut out the B teams for our athletics, and maybe no more marching band or less instruction in art, things like that. And the parents say, you know, I don't want my children to suffer. I'm going to bite the bullet. I'll vote for the referendum and do what's best for my kids. And as a result of that, oftentimes more parents will come out to vote on that than the average voter that's perhaps not a parent. And so sometimes referendums will pass, even though perhaps the majority of the taxpayers in the area are feeling like the tax burden is more than they really want to bear. So that's another reason. If you pass a referendum, and it's the example I gave you, 11% in 1 year, and the high school is responsible for 1/3 of your total tax bill, that can be a significant impact. Now you may say, okay, fine, so they passed the referendum, we pay an extra 11% that year, and you know, we can live with that. But it's not just an extra 11% that year. It's an extra 11% forever. Unless, of course, at some point in time, the high school board decides that they will, you know, lower that levy below where it was to start with, because once it's raised at 11%, the following year when they have their levy meeting, and they're thinking about raising it another 3%, it's 3% on top of the 11%. So you can see how you could end up paying more even when the value of the property is going down. So that's my first example. I got two more. The second one doesn't take quite as much time because it's about exemptions. Most of us, as homeowners, we get the homeowner exemption. All you got to do to qualify for that is live in the home and own the home. If you got your homeowner's exemption last year, but for some reason you didn't get it this year, you can anticipate paying higher taxes. Same thing goes for the senior exemption or the senior freeze or any of the other exemptions that are available. So I want to suggest to you that you check your tax bill and see if you got the exemptions that you were entitled to. And I'm going to come back and talk a little bit more about exemptions and what you can do about it if you didn't get an exemption that you were entitled to. But let me get to the third reason why taxes can go up while values go down, and that's the economy. Now, think back to 2007. Well, actually, let me talk about something else first that's related. Cook County is different than all 101 other counties in Illinois in the level of assessment for its properties. In every county outside Cook County, all properties, residential, commercial, industrial, and vacant land, are assessed at 33 1/3% of their true market value. So that means that if you owned a house in Lake County and a factory in Kane County and a food store in DuPage County, and they were all worth $100,000, the assessment on each of those properties would be $33,333.33. But Cook County is different. In Cook County, we assess residential property differently than we assess commercial and industrial property. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you live in a nice area of Wheeling, and your home is worth $500,000. The assessment rate on residential property in Cook County is 10%. That means the assessment would be 10% times 500,000, which would be $50,000. So you'd have a $50,000 assessment on your home. Let's say that down the street you have a neighbor, and she's a beautician. She owns a standalone beauty shop out here on Dundee Road. That standalone beauty shop is worth $500,000. But the assessment rate on commercial property in Cook County and industrial property is 25%. So her assessment will be $125,000, which means that she will pay 2.5 times more than a residential property owner that owns a property that's valued exactly the same. That's not counting any exemptions that a residential property owner would be able to receive that a commercial property owner would not. Now, I'm telling you that for a reason, so I want you to keep that in the back of your mind, and you'll get why I'm telling you it in a minute. Now, let me give you an example of what can happen, or what has happened, really, because of this poor economy. Let's say we've got another business owner. His business is owning strip stores, and he owns a strip store over here on the corner of Elmhurst Road and Dundee. And let's say it has 5 units, 5 stores. In 2007, beginning of the year, they're all rented out. A few months later, the recession hits. The stock market dives, people are thrown out of work, real estate values go down. One of the units that's rented out there is a medium-sized real estate office. And after about 6 months, the owner of that office realizes that he's not selling any property, he's not making any money. So he lets the lease expire, he goes out of business, he moves out. Next door to him is a florist. 6 months after the recession hits, the florist realizes that flowers are not a necessity, and a lot less people are buying flowers. So he starts looking around for other places he can do business. He looks in DuPage and Lake and McHenry County. He looks up in Wisconsin and over in Indiana, and he may move out to one of those places. Or he may just decide that at the age of 62, he's been working for 30 years in this business, he's making less money than he ever has, and he decides it's just not worth it anymore, and he decides to retire. So the lease expires, The business moves out of there, and that business owner, he's got 2 empty units. What does he do? Well, the first thing he does is he hires a commercial real estate broker. That broker goes out and tries to rent those 2 units. So he puts the property on the multiple listing service, he advertises on the internet, he advertises in the newspaper. He puts up a sign, he passes out flyers, he talks to other realtors, he contacts other business owners to see if perhaps they'd like to change locations and move into these units. But in this recession, first of all, he's not finding any new startup businesses. The business owners that are in existence that he talks to, the first thing they do is they go back to their landlord and they ask if he can make an adjustment on their lease, or if he could do a free build out, if they can get a discount on their utilities. And most of those landlords are willing to do it because they don't want their unit to go vacant because they want that monthly income. So 6 months goes by and the units don't get rented out. They remain vacant. So this business owner, he's a smart guy, and he knows that the value of his commercial property is directly related to the income producing potential of that property. So what does he do? Well, he files an appeal with the Cook County Assessor's Office, which, by the way, is a completely separate office from where I'm at, the Board of Review. And the assessor probably gives him a reduction in his assessment. And if the assessor doesn't give him a reduction, he'll come to the Board of Review. And under the scenario that I just laid out, chances are very high that we'll give him a significant reduction in his assessment. And so when the next tax bill comes, he's going to pay less, significantly less. So you may say to yourself now, wow, that's too bad, because now the schools, the park district, the library, they're going to have to cut back on their budget a little bit because they're not collecting that money. Not true. All the governmental units will get what they're asking for. What happens is that all other property owners pay a little bit more. So maybe it's only $1. Maybe it's only $5. We could all afford that. But then take the example that I just gave and multiply it by hundreds and probably thousands of properties, whether they're strip stores or office buildings or other types of properties throughout Cook County. Now you've got a lot less money coming in from all those properties, and it has to be made up for by the rest of the property owners. And imagine also that you've got some large properties going out of business, maybe a Walmart or a Kmart or a large factory, properties that perhaps were responsible for paying millions of dollars in taxes. And you've got a lot less revenue because their assessment has been reduced significantly. And so your value can go down, but your taxes can go up because everybody has to make up for what's lost. So anyhow, I hope that was a satisfactory explanation on why your taxes go up and when your value goes down. I know nobody likes hearing it, but at least you know a little bit more about why things are happening. Let me move to the next topic, and that's exemptions. I mentioned earlier that if you don't get an exemption, if you got an exemption one year, you didn't get it the next, you can end up paying more. I'd like to suggest to everybody that they do something, and you don't have to do it now, but look at your tax bill. This would be the second installment tax bill, the one that you got on July 1st of this year. It was due August 1st. Go to the bottom of the bill. There should be a line that says homeowner's exemption, and look at that line. There should be a dollar amount there. Now, it could be any amount, and it's going to vary from homeowner to homeowner. So it could be a couple $100, it could be $1,000. If there is a dollar amount, that means you got your homeowner's exemption. But if it's 0.00, then you didn't get the exemption. And if you didn't get the exemption, you can do something about it. You can file what's called a certificate of error at the Cook County Assessor's Office. Now, the Cook County Assessor is responsible for administering all exemptions in Cook County, all right? So if you fill out a certificate of error, assuming you were eligible for that exemption, you can get a refund for the amount you paid over and above the amount you should have paid had you only gotten the exemption that you were entitled to. Jerry Sadler is here, and his office, which is at 1616 North Arlington Heights Road in Arlington Heights, is open from 9 till 4:30, Monday through Friday. They can help you with that. They've got the forms. All you have to do is provide evidence that you lived in the home as of the date in question. In this most recent year, it would be January 1st of 2012. They'll help you fill out the form. It's a simple form, and you can send it in. It'll probably take several months, and you can get a refund. Now, the same thing applies for the senior exemption. About 2.5 years ago, I participated in a press conference with the Cook County Assessor. He was upset about something that I was upset about too. He made an announcement that tax bills were about to go out and that 50,000 senior citizens who had received the senior exemption the previous year weren't going to be getting it on the tax bill that was going out. The reason for that was that the state legislature had changed the law. Prior to the change in the law, the senior exemption, once you turned 65, you applied for it, you got it, it renewed automatically every year. But they changed the law. They said you have to renew it every year. You have to fill out a new paper and send it in to get that exemption. Well, you know what happened? A lot of seniors didn't know about the change in the law. Or if they knew about it, they didn't know how to renew. Or if they knew how to renew, they forgot, or they didn't know how to fill out the paperwork, or they forgot to send it in, or it was lost by the post office, or it was received by the assessor's office, but then there was a keystroke error. Bottom line, 50,000 people who should have gotten the exemption didn't get it. There may be one of those people in this room today, and you may not have gotten it since then, because what the assessor does is for everyone who gets the senior exemption each year, he'll send you a reminder to renew. But if you lost it back then the assessor doesn't know that you're entitled to it. He's not sending you a reminder, and if you didn't find some other way to figure it out, then you might not be getting that exemption. So you can do the same thing. You can file a certificate of error, and you can get a refund. And the good news is that you can go back 3 years. So our 3 most recent tax bills are for tax year 2012, 11, and 10. So I suggest that everybody go home, take a look at your last 3 tax bills and make sure that you got the exemptions you were entitled to. And if you didn't, go see Assessor Sadler, who has something to add.
Dan, they not only will take away your senior exemption, they'll take away the homeowner's exemption too, because they don't know if you even live there anymore. So you lose both exemptions.
Right. You know, and I should tell you, when I was the township assessor, we would get people coming in every once in a while complaining that their tax bills were higher than they expected, asking us to look at it. And sometimes one of the things we were finding is that they didn't have their homeowner exemption, and what we'd reactively say is, well, you didn't apply for your homeowner exemption. And more often than not, they'd say, what are you talking about? I've been getting my homeowner exemption for years. Why wouldn't I be getting it this year? It's supposed to automatically renew, which is true. What we figured out was this. Something was happening. People were doing something to the titles of their property that were causing the Cook County assessor to believe that the property had been transferred. When property is transferred, they assume that the new owner will apply for the exemptions that they're entitled to. When they don't receive an application, they don't issue the exemption, and that property doesn't get it. So people were doing one of 3 things. They were either refinancing, they were putting the property into trust, or one owner was quitclaiming the deed over to another owner. Now, this wasn't causing the reaction at the assessor's office every time. As a matter of fact, it was probably causing this to happen the minority of times. But even when things happen the minority of times in a county the size of Cook County, where you've got 1.8 million parcels of property, you're probably talking about thousands of people who are losing their homeowner exemption, even though they didn't do anything, at least not on purpose, to lose it. So in any case, if you've lost either of those exemptions, you can go back 3 years, file a certificate of error with the Cook County assessor, and the township assessor, Jerry Sadler, who, by the way, township assessor, completely separate governmental entity from the Cook County assessor, so he's not responsible for assessing property in Cook County. Jerry is a taxpayer advocate, and he's there to help people with whatever problems they have with their tax bill. So anyways, that's all I want to tell you about exemptions. Now let's move on to actually filing an appeal at the Board of Review. I've been doing these seminars for quite a few years. I used to work at the Board of Review as an analyst, and I used to fill in for my boss. And now, since I've been a commissioner myself, we've been doing these the last almost 3 years, and typically we get the same questions over and over again. So I'm going to try to answer your questions before you ask them, and if anybody has more questions when we're done. I'll be more than happy to take whatever you got. But the first question is, hey, why should I appeal at all? Let me give you a couple of reasons, and not a couple, I'll give you 4. First reason is it's free. We don't charge anything at the Board of Review. So the only cost to you is whatever work you might put in gathering evidence, or, of course, if you decide to hire an attorney, which is certainly your right to do, you'll probably have to pay the attorney for the services that he provides. But other than that, no cost. Next reason, good chance for success. The first year I was at the Board of Review, the success rate for residential property owners who appealed their property was 54%. Last year, the success rate for all property owners that appealed at the Board of Review was 64%. Now that number has varied from year to year, although I can't recall a year, at least not in recent memory, when the success rate's been less than 50%. So your chances are pretty good. And I would say the fact that you're here listening to this seminar probably increases your chances, because when you walk out of here, you're going to know more about how to file an appeal than the average person. Next reason is potential for multi-year savings. All of us who live in Wheeling, everybody who lives in the northern half of suburban Cook County was reassessed this year. The assessor reassesses every 3 years, so we got reassessed in 2013. So if you file an appeal with the Cook County Board of Review this year and you receive a reduction, that appeal or that reduction will stay in place, and I would say more than 99% of the time for the next 3 years, for 2013, 14, and 15. So you have an opportunity for multi-year savings. Now, that's not to say that you can't appeal in 2015 and 16 as well if you think in those years you're still overassessed. But like I said, in about 99% of the cases, the reduction that we grant will stay. Now, there are some exceptions to that. Occasionally, the assessor will have a unique difference of opinion with us, and he will jack an assessment back up even though we've lowered it, in which case I would invite you to come back to us and bring us the same information, and we'll probably reduce it for you again, but most of you won't have to do that. Last reason for appeal. Let's suppose that you are convinced that you're overassessed. You gather your evidence, you send it to the Board of Review, and you wait for the reduction that you know you're entitled to. We review your evidence, and what we find is that you are in fact not overassessed. You're confused. You're really underassessed. We will not raise your assessment. So you don't have to worry about something bad happening if you appeal your assessment to us at the Board of Review. We will not raise your assessment. And if you bring in evidence regarding a neighbor that you think justifies a reduction in your property, and we determine that in fact your neighbor is underassessed, we're not going to raise your neighbor either, so you don't have to worry about getting your neighbor in trouble. So there's no downside to appealing at the Board of Review. Next question. How do I know if I'm overassessed? There's a variety of reasons why people appeal at the Board of Review. The most common reason is called lack of uniformity. All that really means is that your house compared to other similar homes is assessed higher. I'm going to give you a detailed description of how to file that kind of appeal, because about 95% of all residential property owners appeal based on lack of uniformity. But I want to go through some other reasons first and then circle back around to that lack of uniformity reason. So next reason is recent purchase. If you purchase your home in the last 3 years, for our purposes that means since January 1st of 2010, we will use the purchase price to help us determine what the assessment ought to be. So for example, if you bought your house last year for $250,000, if you're currently assessed at $30,000, we will apply the statutory assessment rate for residential property of 10% to that $250,000 purchase price, and we will say your assessment ought to be $25,000. So we'll reduce you from $30,000 to $25,000. Now, by the same token, if you were already at $20,000 assessment, we're not going to raise your assessment, and we will not use that purchase price against you. So if you decide you want to appeal based on lack of uniformity, you can go ahead and do that, and the purchase price is not going to help you. So not going to hurt you. Purchase price can help you, but it can't hurt you. Now, I do want to let you know that we're only going to use sales that are arm's length transactions. That means a transaction that is not between relatives, is not a short sale, and is not a foreclosure. If it's any one of those three things, we will not use the purchase price to help us determine value. The evidence that you need for a recent purchase is your closing statement. The closing statement has the name of the buyer and the seller, the purchase price, and the date of sale. It would also be good if you could include with us a little affidavit from you just stating that this is an arm's length transaction, not between relatives, not a short sale, and not a foreclosure. And that should be sufficient evidence for us to make a determination on your behalf. Next reason for appeal, market value. The Cook County assessor puts a market value on every property. If he put a market value on your property of $300,000, but you believe your property is in fact worth only $250,000, then you can file a market value appeal. You need to give us evidence though. A good type of evidence would be an appraisal. Now, we consider an appraisal to be expert testimony. That does not mean, however, that we will necessarily embrace the number on the appraisal. We may very well do that. But first, we're going to look at the appraisal, and we're going to determine for ourselves whether we think that the appraiser did a good job. And so we're going to look at the comparable properties he used, we're going to look at the adjustments he made, and we're going to see whether or not we think he did a good job. If he did a good job, we'll use that number. If we think that he was off a little bit, we may use a slightly different number. If we think it's a horrible appraisal, we won't use it at all. Other evidence is information of recent sales of homes like yours in your neighborhood. Where do you get that? Well, you could go to your local realtor. They have access to the multiple listing service, and they can print out for you a list of all the properties that have sold through the MLS that are like yours, that have sold, in the last year, year and a half. And if you can gather enough evidence to show us that your house, in fact, is not worth what the assessor says it's worth, we can give you a reduction. The other place to get that information is at your local township assessor, Jerry Sadler. Jerry has a very good database. They get their information, and by the way, they get information on all sales. Realtors are limited to only those sales that are done by realtors, but they don't get the for sales by owner. So Jerry's office has all the information. They get it from the recorder of deeds, is that right? Recorder of deeds. I will warn you, their information is about 3 or 4 months late, so because it takes a while for the recorder of deeds to send that information up to the assessor and for him to get it into his database, but he has sales data going back many, many years, and he can pop that information out pretty quick for you and give you the information that you need. Next reason for appeal, a mistake in the description of the property. When we get reassessed, the assessor sends us a description of our property, and there's all kinds of descriptive items like the number of bedrooms and bathrooms, and is there a garage, is it a 2-car or a 1-car, is it attached, is there a side drive, is there a basement, is it full or partial, is it finished or unfinished, how old is the house, what's the roof type, all kinds of things. For our purposes at the Board of Review, the most important error that the assessor can make is in the living square footage of the home. So let me tell you how to measure the living square footage of the home. You measure from the outside dimensions. So if you live in, for instance, a simple ranch-style home, you could take length times width. That tells you the living square footage. It includes everything inside the home, with a couple exceptions, which I'll give you in a moment, but includes everything inside the home: the walls, the hallways, the bathrooms, the closets, all the regular rooms. But there's a couple of exceptions. It does not include an attached garage. Does not include a unfinished, unheated attic. Does not include the basement. Does not include a lower level family room like what you would find in a bi-level style home. Does not include a 3-season room, the kind of room that's sometimes built onto the back of a house, but it has no heating system. Not part of the living square footage. If you live in a two-story colonial type home, and you happen to have a nice big foyer, you walk in, it's beautiful, 15 feet by 10 feet, something like that, and you look up and you don't see a ceiling that's 8 or 9 feet tall, you see a ceiling that's as tall as the roof of the house. That means there's no living space right above. But from the outside of the house, it may very well look like there should be living space there, right? So the assessor could make a mistake. And the example I gave you, 10 foot by 15 foot foyer, that's 150 extra square feet that you could be paying for. And that could be, a sizable amount on your tax bill. If the assessor says your house is 1,500 square feet, but your house is really only 1,000 square feet, that means that you're paying 50% more on the building portion of your assessment than you ought to be paying, and that can be a lot of money. So, you can come to the Board of Review, and you can argue that your square footage is incorrect. But you have to give us the evidence to prove to us that, in fact, the assessor's number is wrong, and your number is right. Good evidence could be a Plata survey. If you have a ranch-style home, it gives you a bird's eye view. You can take length times width, and we can figure out what the square footage is. An appraisal is good evidence. There's usually 2 or 3 different places on an appraisal that says the living square footage. We consider that expert testimony. And most appraisals also include a drawing of the house. That helps us as well. If you get a letter from a state-certified licensed architect written on his stationery, on his letterhead, with his state seal on it, testifying that he inspected and measured your home, and that the square footage is in fact the number that you say, and not the number that the assessor says, we would consider that to be expert testimony. If you've got architect's drawings, that could be good evidence as well, although I will tell you that I've seen architect's drawings that are just about impossible to read. So what you need to do is use your common sense. Look at what you're submitting to us and say to yourself, the person looking at this evidence is never going to see my home, and unless you ask for a hearing, which is your right, by the way, unless you have a hearing, they're never going to talk to me. No one's going to explain this to them. Will they be able to determine by what I'm turning in what the square footage of the home is, and in fact that it is what I say and not what the assessor says? And if you're satisfied that what you've got is sufficient, then I'd say there's probably a pretty good chance that the analyst will be able to figure out what you've sent in. By the way, evidence that I've seen on more than one occasion that is not good, if you walk around your house and you do a little drawing and and you measure all the rooms and you send that in, we're probably not going to consider that to be expert testimony. So get us something better that's going to be more convincing. Last reason for appeal, vacancy. If something happens to your home, like let's say you have a fire, and as a result, you have to move out of your home. Your house is vacant for a period of time. We can give you a vacancy on the building portion of your assessment for that period of time when you have been forced out of your home. Now, good evidence for that could be a fire marshal's report, photographs of the inside and outside damage to the home, a letter from the village saying that your occupancy permit has been removed, and then maybe a subsequent letter saying that the occupancy permit has been granted back to you once again. An affidavit from you describing what happened, saying that you had to move out on a particular date and you were able to move back on another date. Maybe an affidavit from your next door neighbor or the person living across the street, saying that the Joneses had a fire on a particular date. The next day I saw them pack up their car and drive away and they didn't come back for 4 months. All those things can be helpful. Give us as much as you can give us. Bring it to the level where it's compelling evidence so that there can be no doubt that in fact something happened, you couldn't control it, you had to move out, and if you've moved back in, give us the move back date as well. If you're out till the end of the year, we can potentially give you the vacancy till the end of the year, and you can even come back the next year to say, yeah, and I didn't move back into my house until February 25th, and so I want a vacancy for that period from January 1st to February 25th as well. Vacancy is not limited to damage due to fire. It could be damage due to a flood if water came into your living room or something like that and made the house unlivable. If a tree falls on the roof and causes a big gash. If a tornado rips off the back wall. If you've got mold in your basement and it goes up the ventilation system. Mold is a very, very serious problem. It can make you very sick and it can force you out of the house. That would be a reason. The most unusual case of vacancy I ever had was when I was an analyst with the Board of Review, and this homeowner, he came in to present his case, and I looked at the paperwork, and all it said was that he had to move out because he had a crack in the foundation. So I asked him about it. What's this about the crack in the foundation forcing you out of the house? And he said, well, actually what happened is the village pulled my occupancy permit. And I said, well, I don't understand. Why would the village do that? He says, well, you know, what I've got is I've got a river flowing underneath my home. And it's caused the ground to shift, and as a result, the foundation is cracked. And I said, okay, well, that sounds like, you know, a significant problem, but I still don't understand why it makes the house unlivable. He says, well, the village is worried that the ground is going to shift even further and it's going to rupture my gas lines and the house will explode. So I said, okay, you got your exemption. And I actually heard this year, I did a seminar in Des Plaines with the mayor who used to be a village trustee, and he remembered that case. And he said that house ended up being plowed over. They never built in that location again. So in any case, vacancy is another reason for appealing at the Board of Review. Now, let's go back to that lack of uniformity. I told you that I would give you a description, a detailed description of how to file that kind of case, because that's probably what most of you will do. So let's talk about what we mean by uniformity at the Board of Review. We're looking at several major things. The first thing is property classification. All residential property is Class 2. But there are subclassifications, Class 202, 203, 204, 205, 234, which is a bi-level, on and on. When you find houses to compare to your house, compare to other houses that are the same classification. So if you got a 202, compare to 202s. If you got a 234, compare to 234s. Same thing with a neighborhood. Every 3 years, the assessor divides every township into neighborhoods. Now, it's not the kind of neighborhoods we're accustomed to. It's not the kind of neighborhood that's associated with Buffalo Grove High School. It's not the kind of neighborhood that's associated with St. Joseph the Worker Parish. It's just a geographic area where the assessor believes that the homes are in some way homogeneous. Every neighborhood is assigned a number. Your neighborhood number may be 10. It may be 20. It may be 99. It may be 115. Whatever neighborhood your house is in, compare to other homes within that neighborhood. Construction. As far as the assessor is concerned, there are 4 construction types. Brick, which is the same as masonry, brick and frame, frame and stucco. Your house falls in one of those categories. To the best of your ability, when you're finding comparable properties, compare to other properties that are of the same construction style. Now, we understand that when you're limiting your scope of comparables to a neighborhood and to a property classification, you're narrowing down your total choices for comparables. So if you've got a brick home and you find another home that's just like your brick home, but it's brick and frame, that's okay. You can submit that and we'll consider it. We may make an adjustment based on the fact that it's somewhat different construction style, but that's a comparable that could help you. However, my suggestion is that if you can find good comparables that are the same construction style, if you have brick, compare to brick. If you have frame, compare to frame. Same thing with age. If you have a 50-year-old home, try to compare to other 50-year-old homes, or 40-year-old homes, or 60-year-old homes. Please don't give us comparables that are 10 years old or 110 years old. Those are not good comparables for a 50-year-old home. Square footage. A Class 203 home is the most common type of home in Cook County. The definition for a Class 203 home is less than 2 stories, between 1,000 and 1,800 square feet. Now, you could give us any Class 203 home you want as a comparable. However, if your Class 203 home is 1,100 square feet, we would much rather see other comparable Class 203 homes that are also 1,100 square feet, or 1,000, or 1,200, rather than Class 203 homes that are 1,700 or 1,800 square feet. I'm not telling you you can't submit them. I'm not telling you they can't help your case, but I will tell you that we'll give more weight to those homes that are closer in square footage to your home rather than those homes that are farther away in square footage. The same thing goes for proximity. A neighborhood could be several miles long and wide. And while you could submit a comparable property from anywhere in that neighborhood, even a mile or two away, we would much rather have you submit comparable properties that are close rather than far. So rather than giving us comparables that are a mile away, give us some that are 3 blocks or 2 blocks or 1 block away or across the street or on the same block. We're going to give more weight to those comparables that are close rather than those comparables that are far away. So just keep that in mind when you're looking for your evidence. A couple of other more minor things. Occasionally people will look for homes that are just like theirs. Their home will have a 2.5 car attached garage, but they'll find a home like theirs that has no garage at all. Well, we know at the Board of Review that a 2.5 car attached garage adds significant value to a home. And so if you find comparables that are assessed somewhat lower, that's probably not going to help you. The same thing applies for the basement. If you've got a house with a full basement and you come up with comparable homes that are sitting on a slab or on a crawl space, that's probably not going to do you a lot of good. So try to find homes that also have a basement. And in the case of the garage, you know, if you can't find a house like yours that has a 2.5 car attached garage, at least find a house that has a detached garage or something for housing the car to make it more like your home. So that's what we're looking at for uniformity. Now, let me give you the formula to help you determine whether or not your house is assessed higher or lower than homes that are uniform to yours. And by the way, this description I'm giving you is in the handout that you have, so if you don't write it down, don't worry about it. It's right there for you to take home with you. Let's assume that we've got a Class 203 home. The home is assessed at $25,000 and it has a total living square footage of 1,500 square feet. And by the way, this example I'm giving you is for the building and not the land. The reason for that is the assessor makes a lot more mistakes in the building. He tends to do a very good job on the land. Doesn't mean you can't appeal your land assessment, but for our purposes, we're going to stick with the building. What we're looking for is the assessment per square foot of the building. So, if you've got a total assessment of $25,000, the assessment's divided into 2 parts, the land assessment and the building assessment. If the land assessment is $10,000 and the building assessment is $15,000 and the building square footage is 1,500, what we want to do is we want to divide the building assessment by the building square footage. So we're going to divide 15,000 by 1,500. If we divide 15,000 by 1,500, what do we get? $15,000 divided by 1,500. 10. Very good. All right. There's a brave man over there. So you've got 10. $10 a square foot for that house. Now you've got a starting place. I'm at $10 a square foot. What's everybody else at that has a house like mine? You do your research, and if you find that most of the homes are at $9.50 and $10 and $10.50 and $11 and $12 and $13, then you're probably pretty fairly assessed. You probably don't need to file an appeal at the Board of Review. But if you find a pattern where there's homes at $9 and $8, $7 and $6 a square foot, then you know you've got evidence to show that you're overassessed and you probably have a pretty good chance to get a reduction at the Board of Review. So, next question is, where do I get my, my information? Where do I get my evidence? I'll give you 2 good places. In my opinion, the best place to get your information is in the room, in your house, where you have a computer. Because you can go to the Cook County Assessor's website, which is cookcountyassessor.com, and you can look up any property in Cook County. He has got a great database that contains all 1.8 million properties in Cook County. He's got a description of every property. He's got a photo of every property, including yours. So my suggestion is that you go to that database at the Cook County Assessor's website. And by the way, that website has a lot of other good information about exemptions and other things. And if you want to learn a lot about the property tax system, go and just sort of wade through it and enjoy it. I'm going to take questions at the end. And you can learn a lot. But in any case, go to the database. My suggestion is look up your own property. You can look it up either by your property index number or by your address. I've noticed that it works better when you use your property index number. But in any case, look up your property and print it out. The first page will be the description of the property. Second page, the photo. You can find out on that page what neighborhood you're in, what your property classification is. You can see your assessment. You can do that calculation I told you about. You know, and if your calculation is $10.29, then you can write it down on that page. Then you go and you search. Now you can do a query on this database that he has, and you can ask for, you can say, give me every home in Wheeling Township in neighborhood number 9, that's class 234, and it'll spit out all those properties with the address, the PIN number, the assessment. There'll just be one line. You can then click on whatever you want. It'll pull up the full description. You can look at the photo to see if you think that this is a house that's like yours. You can do the calculation to see if it's assessed higher or lower per square foot of living area, and you can make a decision whether or not you want to use that as one of your comparable properties. Now, the other place you can go to get this information is the local township assessor's office, Jerry Sadler. They have a database. It's not exactly the same kind of database as what's on the website, but it has all the same information, and they can print you out a list of every home in your neighborhood that's your classification, and they can actually print it out so that the assessment per square foot is already on there. And they can give you everyone that's assessed higher and everyone that's assessed lower. And if there's 100 homes, you can see whether or not 90 of them are assessed lower than yours, or 90 of them are assessed higher than yours. And you can tell right there sort of where you're at compared to everybody else, and you can make your determination whether or not you want to file the appeal and perhaps what comparable properties you want to use. And they will print out for you a description of each one of those properties. So they are available to you, and they are available to help you put together the appeal. But the fact that you're here tonight, hopefully you're going to walk out and be able to do this on your own, and you won't have to go ask for help from anybody. As far as putting together the appeal, my suggestion is this: if you're doing it on your own, you want to give us at least 5 comparable properties. I would say you don't need to give us more than 5, but you're not limited. If you want to give us more than 5, that's fine. You probably don't need to give us 35. That would be a lot to look through for any analyst. But 5 good ones usually, can do the trick. In any case, my suggestion is print them out for the property that is your property that you're appealing. On the first page that has the description of the property, at the very top of the page, write subject property. That's your property, the subject of the appeal. In the white space in the body of the description of the property, write the assessment per square foot and circle it. Then do the same for all the comparable properties. So for the first comparable at the very top, write comparable number 1, then the assessment per square foot, the second comparable number 2, and so on. And then take the subject property, put it on top, take the comparable properties, put them in ascending order, staple it in the upper left-hand corner, and you've got a package of evidence. If you want to write us a note describing your evidence, feel free to do that. We will read the note. If you want to write us a note describing any special circumstances, please do. If you do have a special circumstance where the information isn't really covered in your evidence, and it's the type of thing where you would need evidence, please give us the additional evidence, whatever that might be. So that's how you put together the appeal. Now, how and when do you file your complaint? and when do you file your evidence? Everybody here should have received a paper complaint form. Does everyone have one? Okay. There are two ways to file your complaint. One way is with that paper complaint form that we handed to you. Don't fill it out right now. It's pretty easy to fill out. I want to mention that there is a spot on that complaint form where it says, I request a hearing at the Board of Review. If you want to come downtown to 118 North Clark Street to the 6th floor and have a hearing and talk to an analyst who'll be working your file, it's your right to do. My suggestion is that if you're filing a simple lack of uniformity case and you have written documentation, you probably don't need to come downtown and argue your case. However, it's your right to do so. So if you think that you need to do that, you're more than welcome to. Just check the box and you will receive a letter in the mail from us eventually telling you of a date and time to come downtown. If you fill out this paper form tonight, what we will do is we will send you a letter in a week or two confirming that in fact we've received your complaint. However, if you don't want to wait for that letter, the other option is to file a complaint online. You can go to cookcountyboardofreview.com and it'll bring you to a home page, and right near the top of the home page it'll say file here. Click on it. It's very simple. You do need to know your property index number and you do have to have an email address in order to file online. It should take you no more than 90 seconds, and then you're going to hit, I believe it's submit or enter. As soon as you do that, it'll generate a message, and the message will say, would you like to print out your complaint form? I suggest that you say yes, and you print out the complaint form, because on the complaint form will be your complaint number. And once you have that complaint form with a complaint number in hand, that's your proof that you filed a complaint. So if at some later date, for some odd reason, we tell you we never got your appeal, you can say, oh no, I've got the printout here, it's got the complaint number, and if we've got a complaint number, we're going to know that we made a mistake and we'll be able to look it up and you won't lose out. And by the way, by filing online, that'll also automatically generate an email message that will be sent to you, which will also confirm that you filed at the Board of Review. So for anyone who wants instant gratification, my suggestion is file online. We just started online appeals 2 years ago for the first time. The first year we had 24% of all the appellants file online. Last year we had 86%, and we're hoping to exceed that this year. It saved us a lot of time and money in the cost of paper forms and in the cost of human beings having to enter the data. And I think it saved a lot of appellants' time because they haven't had to acquire the form, they haven't had to drop it off or mail it. All they do is sit in their room that they have a computer and take 90 seconds and file the complaint. Now, you can file your complaint online, but you cannot file your evidence online. When you file online, you'll get a message that says, please submit your evidence within 5 business days, and I would suggest that you do so. However, if by some chance you're not able to file within 5 business days, and we receive the evidence a couple days later, we're not going to throw it out. We're going to make every effort to take that evidence and get it into we create a paper file for every appeal that we have. We'll make every effort to get that evidence into the file. If you're filing on the paper form, I would suggest that you gather your evidence as quickly as you can. The last day for filing your complaint is, I believe, December 3rd. So don't file after December 3rd. File before December 3rd. If you file after, it'll be too late, and there's really no excuse that we'll take for you filing late. But as far as the evidence, my strong suggestion is that you get your evidence in no later than December 3rd, preferably as quickly as possible after you file either the online or the paper complaint form, just to make sure that we can get it into your file. But like I say, we do make every effort, even if something comes very late, to get it to the file. The problem comes in, though, once we circulate the files around our office to the various analysts. There's 50 or 60 of those people, and it can be difficult to track down the file. Next question is, who's going to review my appeal? The Board of Review is governed by 3 elected commissioners. Each of us are elected from a separate geographic district. I represent most of suburban Cook County. The other two commissioners represent about the north and south half of Chicago and some of the near north suburbs and near south suburbs and near western suburbs. But despite the fact that we are elected from geographic areas, each of us and our staffs have equal authority over any appeal that comes in from any area of Cook County. So what will happen with your file is it comes to the Board of Review, a paper file is created, and then those files are circulated randomly to analysts for one of the three commissioners. So your file may go to an analyst that works for me, or it may go to an analyst who works for Commissioner Rogers or Commissioner Cabinargi. That analyst will review the file, make a determination, write it in the file, and initial that determination. Then that file will be rotated to an analyst who works for another commissioner. That analyst will do the same thing, and then it'll be rotated to the third analyst. In order for you to get a reduction, two of the three analysts have to agree that a reduction is warranted. I want you to know that any evidence that you submit, whether it's comparable properties or a plat of survey or an appraisal or anything else, will be looked at by a human being. We don't make these decisions by computer. Our analysts do have access to a very good database which has information on all the homes in Cook County, and he will look at the information that you have submitted. He may decide the case solely on the information that you submit. He may decide to look in his database, and he may decide to use only the information he's found in his database. He may decide to meld the two, but whatever you submit will get proper consideration, including if you've got photographs that you think show something significant about your property or your area, they'll look at that as well. I can remember when I started at the Board of Review in 1999, the Cook County Assessor did not have a website. All the information had to be acquired differently. Property owners that wanted to appeal had to take a photograph of their own home as well as the comparable properties. And I remember one year I was looking at this evidence from somebody, and a fellow had taken a picture of his home, but he had taken the picture with his daughter, who appeared to be about 5 years old, standing in front of the house. And she was a cute little kid, and she was holding a poster board which was really big. It sort of went up right to her mouth, just about. And it was about this big and went down to below her knees, and she was holding it like this. And it said, "Please lower my daddy's taxes." And I think I did. I think I did that year. So I showed that picture around. Everybody was really amused. But in any case, whatever you give us, we're going to look at. Last question is, once I receive notification from the Board of Review in a letter telling me what the board's decision is, what if I get a no change, which means no reduction, or if I receive a reduction in my assessment, but I don't think it's sufficient, it's not as much as I think it ought to be, do I have any other options? And the answer is yes. You have two mutually exclusive places that you could go to file an additional appeal. The first place is the Circuit Court of Cook County. Now, you should know that if you go to the Circuit Court of Cook County and you don't feel comfortable navigating a courtroom, you may feel the need to hire an attorney. There may be court costs, and the Circuit Court is behind in their decisions by about 4 years. Mostly that's used by commercial industrial property owners, and even many of them don't use that venue. But if you think that's the place for you, you have a right to go there. The other option, which I think is a little bit better option, is a state agency called the Property Tax Appeal Board, PTAB for short. On the letter you get from the Board of Review informing you of our decision, we will mention PTAB. If you're going to file with PTAB, you have to file within 30 days of the date of the letter you get from the Board of Review. If you take more than 30 days, you may forfeit your right to appeal to them. In my experience, they're pretty fair to property owners. They don't charge any money, and you can file based on any reason you want. So, for instance, if you filed at the Board of Review based on lack of uniformity, but you've decided for whatever reason that lack of uniformity isn't your best reason for appealing, and you want to appeal on market value or vacancy or something else, you can appeal for a different reason than you appeal to the Board of Review, or you can appeal for the same reason and submit the exact same evidence, and they may in fact disagree with the Board of Review and grant a reduction. One thing you should know about the Property Tax Appeal Board, they are a severely underfunded state agency. I think for the entire state they have somewhere just a little bit in excess of 30 employees. So if you're a commercial or industrial property owner, they also are backed up 4 years. If you are a residential property owner, they're backed up 2 years, which means that if you go to PTAB and you eventually prevail and you get a reduction from them, you will have already paid the bill for the assessment that you're appealing, which means that what you will do is you will go to the Cook County Assessor, you will file a certificate of error, and you will get a refund for the amount you paid over and above the amount you should have paid had you only gotten that decision from the very beginning. I want to mention just a couple other things, and that is the first place that you can appeal your assessment is with the county assessor. Now, that time for people in Wheeling Township has expired. The time period for appealing at the Board of Review is right now. If you did appeal at the county assessor and you got a reduction, you can still come to the Board of Review. And if we think you deserve a further reduction, we'll grant it. If you appeal to the county assessor and you didn't get a reduction, you can still come to us. We don't care that he turned you down. If there's sufficient evidence, we'll reduce your assessment. If you fail to appeal at the county assessor, that's okay. You can appeal to us. But you must appeal to the Board of Review before you appeal to the Property Tax Appeal Board. If you do not appeal to us, you cannot appeal to them. So be sure, if you have some plan to appeal to the Property Tax Appeal Board, first you appeal to the Board of Review. So those are my formal comments. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. There was a gentleman in back that had a question, so I want to give him the first chance to ask. If you still, oh, did I? Okay. Oh, if you would, if you have a question, since this is being broadcast, there's a microphone up here. If you would come to the microphone. Oh, he said he did get his answer.
Well, he asked him a question and confirmed.
Oh, I'm sorry. Could you come up and, or?
I wanted to know if you could search the database by address and not the property identification number.
You can search for individual properties by address. You can also do a query where you say, for instance, give me every house in neighborhood number 33 on Elm Street. And I believe they even have a query that says, give me every address between 8,000 and 9,000 on Elm Street. So you can do it. By the way, just one thing I want to mention. We are doing something new tonight. For the first time ever here in Wheeling Township, in the village of Wheeling, we have a satisfaction survey. So before you leave, if you care to fill this out, we're just interested in getting people's comments, what you liked or what you didn't like, so we can improve these presentations. So anybody else have a question? You'll need to come up to the microphone.
The last time you did one of these seminars, I also attended.
Thank you.
And I also appealed. And basically, sorry, I'm kind of hoarse. But anyway, I appealed on, I guess, lack of uniformity. And I think the problem that I have is not lack of uniformity, but the overvalue of the houses in Wheeling. Mm-hmm. And since most of the homes in Wheeling have been hit very hard by foreclosures and short sales, it's very difficult to find properties like mine in the same neighborhood that are priced, that are valued properly, because my house is overvalued for what it's worth, for what I could sell it today. And in addition to that, my house is in the floodplain, and the cost of flood insurance has risen dramatically this year, which makes my house worth even less than the same house, just like it, a block over, that's not in the floodplain.
Okay, in that case, I would suggest a market value appeal, and I would try to come up with information, for instance, on the floodplain situation, show what houses are selling for in the floodplain, and then compare them to houses not in the floodplain like those houses, and show us that the houses not in the floodplain are selling for more. In other words,
as a real estate agent, I can tell you right now that we lack those comparables because they're not selling, and the houses that are selling are those that are not in the floodplain or those that are not distressed,
Well,
or distressed
you
properties.
may in that case want to consider hiring an appraiser to get us that information, but, ultimately, we can only act when we have evidence. We can't.
I understand.
So we will make our determination based on whatever you present to us and whatever else we might have at our disposal.
So I would also like to encourage everyone here to get an appraisal done on your property, because the comparables are not out there to show the value that the assessor is valuing our property.
Right, well, of course, that would only be if you're doing a market value appeal as opposed to a comparable lack of
Well,
uniformity appeal.
What I'm saying is there is no lack of uniformity because we are all overassessed. We are all overvalued. So lack of uniformity, that is not a good case. What we have to do is to show the value of what our house is worth today, especially if it's in the floodplain.
Well, that's
And especially if it's in Wheeling.
That's up to
Because
you.
our houses are so overvalued based on the assessor's calculations. So if you're going to win an appeal, get an appraisal done.
I do have to just say something. In past years, and I think Jerry could probably testify to this, there have been many people in the village of Wheeling and Wheeling Township who have received reductions based on lack of uniformity. So you don't have to file a market value appeal. You don't have to get an appraisal in order to get a reduction. You may in your individual case, and it may certainly apply for this woman and perhaps specifically in her neighborhood, but it's not necessarily a rule.
But Dan, the assessor is getting better with his programs of getting uniformity. I mean,
I agree.
better.
I agree. Sir, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think we all learned something here tonight, so at least we're pointed in the right direction and know where to go for help, so that's great. The question for you is this. Length by width, square footage. What about a basement if it's been improved? Finished, most of it finished, some of it not. Does that count as square footage?
No. Even a basement that's finished, that has a bedroom and a bathroom, does not count as square footage. Now, some people, when I say that, they take it the wrong way. It doesn't mean a basement doesn't add value to your home. The assessor will give more value to a home with a basement than without one, but what probably will happen is the house that has the basement will have, let's say, a higher assessment per square foot than a house with no basement.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome. Yes, sir.
So does that mean
Question, but what he just said, if you have a real estate brochure and it says, it's not my case, but it was interesting, 4 bedrooms, and it's really a 3-bedroom house, but it has a bedroom and a bathroom, is that legal to do?
Yeah, I think a realtor can list a home as 4 bedrooms, even if 1 bedroom is in the basement. We're not concerned at the
Okay.
Board of Review how realtors describe homes.
All right, my question was, and I'm not sure if I quite understood you right, but I was just curious because I got my tax bill here. I'm fairly new here. I bought a year ago November, so in 2012. And it's the first time I really looked at it besides paying it. It shows the 2012 property value $8,000 more than what I paid. So does that mean right there that I should get a reduction if I go through this process, besides the comparables and everything?
Quite possibly, that would be a rather small reduction, but sure.
Well, small is better than zero, right?
Sure. Oh, I'm sorry. Jane Bernard from the Township Assessor's Office has a comment. Jane, can you please speak loudly?
Sure. If you're looking at a 2012 bill, that's not your current assessment that you're appealing, correct? Andy?
Oh, that is correct, because you were reassessed in 2013.
Well, I don't have that, do I?
You would have received a reassessment notice in the mail. You should have, and if you didn't for some reason, you could go on the website and see what your 2013 assessment is.
Well, we didn't get our bills yet if we pay them twice a year, right?
Yeah, but
We
you
haven't
pay your
gotten them.
tax bill 1 year in arrears. In other words, that bill is for
Yeah,
2012.
no, I got it, but for the current, I guess for, the next tax bill is due in June or whenever, March or June.
The next tax bill will come out February 1st, due March 1st.
Okay, so we didn't get that yet.
No.
You're getting me nervous.
That'll be your first installment 2013 bill.
So, all right, so if I didn't get this, and maybe I did and didn't realize what it is, I don't want to say I didn't get it, who do I contact for that? To see what my 2013 is?
You would contact the Cook County Assessor.
That's you?
No, that's the township assessor. Cook
Okay.
County assessor downtown, well, they can look it up for you. I mean, you can look it up online yourself, but they
Oh,
can
I
do it
can?
for you if you'd like.
Okay. And just a curious general comment. Oh, wait, one more thing. How long is an appraisal good for? Because I have one,
My
but it's
suggestion would-
probably a year old.
Yeah, my suggestion would be give us an appraisal for either 2012 or 2013. We will consider those that are older.
Okay, so
but
it's
we-
the end of
we'd rather
2000.
have more recent ones than
Okay.
older ones if possible.
And just a comment, just out of curiosity, when you were in the beginning talking and you were saying that, you know, if a business moves out and it, you know, it's a major loss in taxes that, you know, basically everybody picks up the slack. Well, what about what we see on the quarterly thing that we get or whatever, all these businesses coming in? Do we get a reduction when a bunch of businesses come in?
Well, if you know, a business fills an empty storefront, then, yeah, that could help out, sure. You know, we
And
want
how would
as
we
many
know that?
businesses here as we can get because businesses pay 2.5 times more than residential property. Right now, you know, in fact, the fact is that commercial industrial property subsidize residential property.
Yeah, so, but what's the lag time for that to take effect? If it's a 3-year thing and 90 businesses move in and only 10 move out, we don't see the benefit of that for 3 years?
No, the assessor will get those on the tax rolls pretty quick. Yeah. Folks, thanks a lot for coming tonight. I want to take a moment to introduce my staff. Right back there, in the waving his hand, is Mike Ruppnow, who is actually a former township assessor from Schaumburg Township. Maggie Height is next to him. John Dislin, waving now. Dan Michaelides is the guy that does condos at our office. If anybody here owns a condo, what I explained for lack of uniformity does not apply. And you should go and talk to Dan, and he can give you some details. My first deputy, Ken Jokum, right there. So we're going to hang out here, and if anybody has additional questions, or if you want to turn in your complaint form, you can fill out that complaint form. You can turn it in to me or any of my staff. And if you have questions, you can come to me or my staff. They can answer the questions just as well as I can. Thanks a lot for being here tonight. Dean, thanks a lot for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Go on, everyone.
Why couldn't I get the HUDs on those houses?